One of the major positive storylines over the past few weeks was Joseph Parker winning a comeback fight against Deontay Wilder. Excuse me. There's a lot of like boxing antics around this fight, right? Like he's got another fight lined up. Anthony Joshua is right there. There's all this stuff happening in boxing. But I want to ask you, how did Joseph Parker defeat Deontay Wilder in the ring? That's all I'm worried about with this question. Like, what did he do as a boxer to grab the win?
He did exactly what he needed to do. Basically, it was a weird little journey to get to that point, because when that fight was first announced, I was thinking like, well, why is he doing that for? Like Deontay Wilder, the dude might be the hardest hitting dude of his generation. What's Parker taking that risk for? And then I sort of wrote about it a little bit, I think, in the email at first, and came around to thinking, well, why wouldn't he? When else is he going to get this opportunity? Think of what's on the line. If he loses, he doesn't really lose anything because he's the underdog anyway. If he wins, he throws himself back in the upper echelon, and it would be the best win on his record. So I came around to thinking, yeah, why not? But I still wasn't thinking he was going to win until I wrote the preview thing about it about a week out. I was working on that and thinking of the different ways in which, okay, so Wilder has this elite power and he's got this like high reputation, knocked out everyone he's fought. The only dude who survived 12 rounds with him, he then knocked out in a rematch like a few years later, with the exception of obviously those 3 fights against Tyson Fury with a draw and 2 defeats. But Tyson Fury is probably the best heavyweight since Klitschko, arguably as good as Klitschko, seeing as he beat him, although at the end of his career. So, that's just the overlap of boxing. But writing about it, I'm thinking, okay, well, Wilder's got that. He's got the reputation, he's got the power. What does Parker have in his favor? And it just became this long list in the article of actually everything else. Maybe like this was his 4th fight of the year. Wilder had fought once, I think, this year, and it lasted like 30 seconds or something. And hadn't fought much basically since the last Tyson Fury fight. I think he's only had one round of action or something. And Parker's fought, I can't remember what the number was, but a bunch since then. And this was his 4th fight of the year. He stayed very busy, so he's active, he's ready. He's had long enough with Andy Lee as his coach to where they've had few ups, a few downs. They've got through the initial let's like change a few kind of stuff phase of his career into the, okay, we're comfortable with how each other works and we've got a rhythm going here. Whereas Wilder was in the 2nd fight with a new trainer, ironically a trainer who his trainer is Malik Scott, who got knocked out against Wilder in the 1st round when they fought each other like 10 years ago or something. So that's got to be a rare instance of a trainer training a guy who knocked him out in the 1st round. I don't know how often that would have happened before. But that's obviously a very new combination. Haven't really had many rounds in the ring together. Think beyond Wilder's power, what does Parker have? Well, he has speed. He has combinations. He has, when I say speed, I'm talking hand speed, but also he has much better footwork. He has the fact that Andy Lee as his trainer also has another aspect beyond just their own chemistry, is that, well, Andy Lee was in the corner as the assistant trainer for Tyson Fury during those fights. Tyson Fury is also Joseph Parker's brother from another mother, so he has access to all the information he needs about how to beat Deontay Wilder from the only professional fighter and professional fight staff who have that information. No one else has done that. Parker had access to all of it. Had fought in Saudi Arabia before, whereas Wilder, I think he fought like Luis Ortiz in Cuba or something like that, and he might have had a fight in like Mexico or something like that, but I don't think he'd ever fought outside of North America, whereas Parker has fought in Europe. He's fought like mainland Europe and also several times in England. He's fought in New Zealand. He's fought in Australia. I think he's fought in Australia. I'm not sure. But he's fought in Samoa as well. He's fought in North America. He's fought in now Saudi Arabia for the 2nd time. He's more traveled, he's more experienced. If you look at the guys that fought beyond beyond Tyson Fury, Wilder doesn't necessarily have the sort of or at the very least, Parker can compete with him and other. I'd say I would put Anthony Joshua ahead of Luis Ortiz, for example. So I think, and you know, Joe Joyce is pretty handy. Chisora is pretty handy. Old mate Andy Ruiz pretty handy. So they're like Parker's have got a good. At this stage in his career, he's racked up some decent fights against some very decent opponents, at least on par with Wilder, if not better. Like, just the more I thought about it, the more I wrote that, like writing that article, I just coming around to thinking, well, if you look beyond the power, if Parker can withstand the power of Wilder, everything's in his favor. Like there's nothing. And admittedly, most fighters have not been able to withstand that power, but Parker's traditionally had a pretty good chin. He did get knocked out by Joe Joyce. Dillian White is another one, another top tier guy who he's fought, who he rocked him a little bit, but the only knockdown was an accidental headbutt, which probably shouldn't have counted as one. A lot of the stuff was all in Joseph Parker's favor, and so I go into the fight myself thinking, despite what all the odds say, and I looked it up too. If I was a gambling man, I'd have had a little punt on the TAB. You had him at like 6-1 outsider favorite, so like $6 on Joseph Parker, and I'm confident he's going to win at this point. And with those odds, that's pretty decent. And yeah, despite that confidence, though, I think the actual performance itself went above and beyond. And so he went in, just like stepped in the ring, eased the first round, keeping at a distance, hovering sort of on the inside track so that he could always get out, use his pace, get out if Wilder came on the charge, keeping Wilder against the ropes so that he didn't have so much room. And Wilder and then Parker just used that speed. He just used that hand speed to get in and out with his little jabs, cautious at first for the first 3 or 4 rounds, not a lot of punches being thrown. And then you start to see Parker realizing that he has more time and space than he anticipated, really starting to throw in some combinations and actually rocking Wilder a fair bit. And he copped some counters. He had to eat a few of those Deontay Wilder punches, but eat them he did. And then almost always came through with something in response. Usually, like it almost looked like Deontay Wilder just needed the big wind up to throw his right hand, and Parker just read it, like he saw it coming. And so by the time that punch comes in, he's already landed 2 of his own. And it was so smart. Like it was such a well orchestrated game plan just to fight to his strengths and to Wilder's weaknesses. And you got to give his staffer, like Andy Lee on downwards, a whole lot of credit for that, how well that was done. But then also one thing Lee said heaps leading into that fight is how Parker has to be alert. 12 rounds, like 36 minutes. If you take your eye off the ball, this guy will hurt you. And that's all your work at risk at that point. It never happened. Like he never slipped up. He never lost focus. It was a full 12-round performance. Comfortably, I think the best performance of his career, beyond comfortably the best sort of game plan and best well executed game plan of his career. And I think also you have to say at this point the best win of his career, like the one that stands up if you're looking at his career now. This is the statement victory of all he's achieved. Astonishingly good stuff. Like I say, I expected him to win. I did, but I didn't expect him to win by potentially all 12 rounds. One of the judges scored it with maximum points to Joseph Parker, considering there weren't any knockdowns or anything like that. I mean, I think you can maybe make 1 or 2 rounds the case for Deontay Wilder, but that's the worst case scenario, is that Parker won 10 rounds of 12. That's absolutely emphatic. And the most hilarious thing about that fight was when the bell rang and then Wilder puts his arm up like he's celebrating, like, bro, you've got no idea, do you? Like, what's just happened? Are you fighting a different fight than we were all watching? I don't know. But even when they're announcing the thing, he still had announcing the result, he still had his arm up like he was expecting it. I know a lot of them do that, but usually they don't do that after they've been kind of like, just tagged for 12 rounds straight. it was a strange one. But this is from the guy who, one of his Tyson Fury fights, he said that the reason he lost was because the mask he wore into the ring was too heavy and it fatigued him. So, he didn't make any excuses after this. He made a point of saying no excuses, but I think he left his excuses quite obvious for everyone to see in the ring. He was not very good. But then at the same time, as Andy Lee said afterwards, it's like, well, where do you draw the line between Wilder being bad and specifically being bad as in like how inactive he was? He just didn't throw many punches. And where do you draw the line between Wilder being bad and Parker forcing him to be bad with a really good game plan that didn't allow him to throw any punches? And I think it is probably a lot more in the favor of, it's obviously a bit of both, but I think it's a lot more in the favor of Parker forced him into that terrible fight. And just, but for all the chat about Wilder versus Joshua that was going on beforehand, which was another thing in Parker's favor, to be honest, is the fact that potentially Wilder had his eye on something bigger. Well, that fight's collapsed now because Joshua doesn't want to fight him because he doesn't have to fight him because Wilder has just embarrassed himself a little bit. Whereas Joseph Parker has now thrown himself right back into the mix, which is, I didn't know he had it in him, but here we are in 2024, and Joseph Parker is probably as well regarded now as he ever has been, and he's a former world title bout holder, so he's in a good spot. And it was, it's just a brilliant performance, a brilliant game plan, and brilliant victory from him.
I think Junior Fa lost early in that event.
Yeah, he did.
That's right.
We don't need to talk so much about Junior Fa because that wasn't great. For Frank Sanchez, who was an unbeaten Cuban heavyweight, who for I can't remember how long it lasted, 6 rounds or something like that. But for the first 3 or 4, he was pretty good. But it was pretty good in this is a cautious, both fighters kind of feeling things out. Junior Fa trying to stymie Frank Sanchez, but then it sort of ramped up and you saw that, well, Sanchez has more gears and Fa doesn't. And it was just that simple. Like Sanchez stepped it up and Fa couldn't take the heat at that point. But I do hope for his sake, it should have been a pretty nice payday. And he was there as part of, he was on the card to fight, but he was also there to spar with Deontay Wilder, as he has done in the past, because obviously he has information on Joseph Parker because he's fought him before and they're both from the same country and they know each other. And I think Wilder's information that he would have got from Junior Fa was not as good as Joseph Parker's information that he would have got from Tyson Fury. But no, it's a tidy little payday for Junior Fa, even though he was outclassed ultimately.